Rain fell in sheets over the city, turning the streetlights into blurred halos and filling the underground garage of Brennan and Hartwell Industries with a low metallic echo. The concrete floor was slick, the air thick with exhaust and damp silence. Ethan Cole crouched beside a black Mercedes. His reflection caught in the chrome as he pressed a knife into the rubber of the third tire. The hiss of escaping air sounded like a dying breath. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped the blade. He wasn't supposed to be here at 6:15 a.m. He wasn't supposed to destroy the car of the most powerful woman in the building. But 30 minutes earlier, while checking an oil leak, he had seen it. A device strapped under the chassis, military grade, wired for remote detonation. He had no phone, no radio, no signal underground, only bad choices and one fragile hope that disabling the car might save a life. Lily's voice echoed in his head. "Daddy, why do you look scared?" He had lied, said he was just tired. But now, each breath felt like a countdown. He could see the red light of the security camera blinking above him. It was recording everything. A maintenance tech slashing the CEO's tires before sunrise. They'd call it rage, sabotage, madness. The elevator dinged behind him. 2 security guards stepped out, their flashlights slicing through the dimness. Freeze. Hands where we can see them. Ethan dropped the knife. The metal clattered and spun across the wet floor. His uniform was smeared with grease from crawling under the car. His fingerprints were everywhere. He lifted his shaking hands. "You don't understand. There's no time." Footsteps. A sharp click of heels. Madison Hartwell emerged from the elevator, sleek and composed, her charcoal suit untouched by the morning rain. She looked at the shredded tires, then at him, this trembling man in a stained uniform, and her face hardened. "What the hell is this?" Ethan took a step forward, desperation cracking his voice. "Please, don't start that car. You have to listen to me. There's a bomb under it." For a second, no one moved. The word hung in the air, heavier than the sound of the rain. The guards froze. Madison stared, and the world seemed to stop breathing. The echo of Ethan's words still hung in the air when the guards pinned him to the floor. Their boots pressed into the concrete near his face. The cold sting of metal cuffs biting his wrists. He tried to speak, but they weren't listening. The air was thick with panic and disbelief. Madison barked orders, her voice sharp and clipped, demanding someone call the police. The bomb squad. Anyone. One of the guards muttered that this was insane, that the janitor was losing his mind. But the other hesitated, eyes darting between Ethan's pale face and the shredded tires. There was something about the conviction in his voice that didn't sound like madness. Minutes later, the sound of sirens bled into the garage, growing louder until flashing red and blue lights filled the concrete space. The bomb squad arrived with heavy suits and steady movements, their calm efficiency cutting through the chaos. Madison stood with her arms crossed, trying to look composed, but her hands trembled slightly. Ethan watched as one of the technicians slid under the car. The silence stretched. Then came the voice, tight and grim. Found it. Exactly where he said it would be. The words landed like a blow. The guards froze. Madison's breath caught. The technician rolled out from beneath the Mercedes, holding a flashlight and shaking his head. Military-grade construction, remote detonator, pressure trigger on the brake line. If this car had moved an inch, it would have gone up. The statement echoed in the silence that followed. Madison turned toward Ethan, her expression unreadable, all color drained from her face. Ethan stood still, cuffed and exhausted. "I told you. There was no signal down here. I couldn't call anyone. The only way to stop it was to make sure the car couldn't move." His voice was low, steady, stripped of anything but truth. One of the guards looked away, ashamed. Another loosened the cuffs without waiting for permission. Madison stepped closer, her heels clicking on the wet concrete. "How did you even know what you were looking at?" Ethan hesitated before answering. "I was Army EOD. Bomb disposal. Spent years learning to see things other people miss. I didn't want this life anymore, but I couldn't walk away and let you die." The bomb squad leader approached and nodded toward Ethan. He's right. His description was perfect. "Saved your life, ma'am." Madison didn't answer. She stared at the car, at the faint curl of smoke rising from the device now neutralized and cold. For the first time, her voice softened. "Someone wanted me dead." Her hand rose unconsciously to the small silver pendant at her neck, the one that had belonged to her father. The gesture was almost tender, almost frightened. The air in the garage felt different now, no longer divided by class or suspicion, but bound by the quiet, unnerving truth that they were standing in the same danger. Ethan looked at her, bruised and weary, and saw not a CEO but a woman who finally understood how close death had come. And for the first time, Madison looked back and saw not a janitor, but the man who had kept her alive. Madison's office was quiet enough to hear the hum of the city beyond the glass. The skyline shimmered in the gray afternoon light, cold and distant. She stood near the window, arms crossed, trying to keep her voice steady as Ethan stepped inside. His uniform was still stained from the garage, the sleeves rolled past his elbows, his hands marked by grease and tension. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them felt like a test. Finally, Madison turned, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She told him to sit. Ethan stayed standing. She hated that it made him look like the only steady thing in the room. Her eyes flicked toward the photo on her desk. Her father's face frozen mid-laughter, the kind of expression she hadn't seen in months before his death. Her voice cut through the stillness. "Why did you do it? Why risk everything?" Ethan's answer came quietly. "Because there wasn't time to do anything else." He told her about the oil marks he'd seen under her car, how the pattern didn't match any recent maintenance. He described the faint glint of metal, the narrow black antenna that told him it wasn't just a mechanical issue. He had crawled underneath, heart pounding, knowing what he was about to find, the pressure plate, the remote receiver, the faint hum of a timer so soft he could feel it more than hear it. If he had hesitated, if he had walked away, she would be gone. Madison stared at him, torn between disbelief and something that felt like shame. She had built her entire world on control, yet this man she'd barely noticed had saved her life by trusting instincts she didn't even know he had. She asked him how long he had worked for the company. 3 years. He said, "Mostly night shifts. People don't see me much." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then he hesitated, as if weighing whether to speak. There was something else. "A few months ago, I found a letter in your office trash. Someone had shredded it, but I could still make out the words. 'Stop the merger or you'll regret it.' I didn't know who sent it, but I kept a copy. Thought it might matter someday." Madison felt the air leave her lungs. Her father had received similar threats before his sudden collapse 6 months ago. The doctors had called it a heart attack, but she had never believed it. The letters had stopped after his death. Until now. She moved toward the desk, her fingers brushing the edge of the frame that held his photo. Her reflection stared back from the glass, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "They killed him, and now they're trying again." Ethan watched her closely. He had seen that kind of quiet rage before, the kind that came from soldiers who'd lost more than they could bear. He told her she needed to be careful, that whoever was behind this wasn't finished. They were patient, powerful, and would try again once they knew the first attempt had failed. Madison turned, her hand closing around the silver pendant at her neck, the one her father had given her the day she took over the company. Her voice steadied. "I won't hide. If they think they can scare me, they've chosen the wrong target." The words hung between them, equal parts defiance and grief. Ethan nodded slowly, the faintest hint of respect in his eyes. Then, for the first time since the garage, she met his gaze and didn't look away. The room felt different now, no longer divided by wealth or rank. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected, a fragile alliance born from danger, loss, and the smallest spark of trust. The building was nearly silent at midnight. The only sound was the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant vibration of the city beneath it. Ethan sat in a narrow control room surrounded by monitors that washed his face in cold blue light. His reflection looked ghost-like against the glass screens as he typed, overriding security clearances that should have been locked to everyone but the head of security. His fingers moved quickly, steady but tense. He had learned long ago how to bypass systems without triggering alerts. Years of military habit made him cautious. He wasn't supposed to be here, but truth didn't live in permission. He accessed the surveillance archive and began scrolling through timestamps. The garage cameras recorded automatically, 48 hours of footage before overwriting themselves. At 02:47 a.m., something caught his eye. A tall figure in a company uniform entered the executive parking level. The man carried a black tool bag slung over his shoulder, the kind used for heavy wiring or explosives work. Ethan zoomed in. The lighting flickered, but the profile was unmistakable. Derek Long, the new head of security, the man who had overseen the investigation that morning, calm and authoritative, the man who had told Madison she was safe. Ethan watched him crouch beside Madison's Mercedes, slide underneath and stay there for 16 minutes. When he stood again, the bag looked lighter. He walked out of the frame without a glance toward the camera. Ethan sat back, feeling the weight of confirmation press into his chest. The truth was worse than he had imagined. Someone inside had planted that bomb, someone with clearance and confidence. He transferred the footage to a flash drive, pocketed it, and shut everything down. As he left the control room, the corridor lights flickered overhead. It felt like the building was holding its breath. The Blue Bird Diner sat on the corner of Lexington and 42nd, a relic from another time. The neon sign buzzed faintly, its blue glow spilling over rain-darkened windows. Madison sat in a back booth, her coat still buttoned, her posture rigid. When Ethan slid into the seat across from her, she looked up, and for once, there was no armor in her expression, just exhaustion. He placed the flash drive on the table and pushed it toward her. She plugged it into her tablet, the screen lighting her face as the footage played. She didn't speak. When the video ended, she sat perfectly still. Then her voice came out as a whisper. "Derek." He was in charge of my father's security, too. Ethan nodded. Richard Hale hired him, didn't he? Madison's eyes widened. Richard had been her father's closest partner, the man who guided her through the transition after his death. He was the one who insisted the merger was vital to the company's survival. Her father had opposed it, said the numbers didn't make sense. She had assumed it was grief clouding his judgment. Now, she wasn't sure. Ethan said quietly that maybe her father hadn't died of a heart attack. Maybe it had been something else. The silence between them grew heavy. Madison looked down at her hands, at the delicate chain of her father's pendant tangled around her fingers. Small memories surfaced her father's sudden collapse. The missing security footage that day. Derek's quick explanation about technical errors. Details that had never fit. Her denial gave way to fury. She looked up, her voice trembling with control. They killed him. Ethan watched her, calm but firm. Whoever did this isn't finished. They'll strike again now that they know we're looking. Madison met his eyes. I won't run. I won't hide. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Then we don't hide. We make them think they've already won. Outside, the diner's neon light flickered against the rain. Inside, the two of them sat in the quiet glow. Two strangers bound by a secret that could destroy them both, planning to turn fear into a weapon. It was the first real moment of light in a world that had been growing darker by the hour. The night pressed against the glass walls of the tower, a sprawl of lights glittering far below like another universe. Inside, Brennan and Hartwell Industries was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made every sound feel dangerous. The clock on the wall read 09:45 p.m. Madison sat at her father's old desk, pretending to study documents spread neatly before her. The office smelled faintly of paper and rain from the storm rolling over the city. A small microphone was hidden beneath the lamp, transmitting every word to the FBI van parked 3 blocks away. Down in the maintenance corridor, Ethan watched the feed on a small monitor. Static hissed in his earpiece as the agents whispered updates. His hand hovered near the sidearm they had reluctantly given him for protection. He wasn't a cop anymore, but he knew how nights like this could go wrong. His pulse matched the rhythm of the storm. Every minute felt longer than the last. The elevator doors opened. Richard Hale stepped out with the calm of a man who believed he owned the air around him. His smile was polite, rehearsed. Madison rose to greet him, her movements deliberate. She thanked him for coming so late, said she wanted to clear up some confusion about the merger. Richard adjusted his tie, pretending amusement, always working. He said, "Your father would be proud." The words tasted wrong. For a few minutes, their conversation was civil, almost sterile. They spoke about business, board meetings, strategy. Then Madison mentioned the letter her father had received before he died, the one warning him to stop the merger, the one Ethan had reconstructed from her office trash. Richard's expression changed. His smile tightened. He said her father had been paranoid in the end. That grief had clouded his judgment. Madison's voice stayed even, but her eyes hardened. She said the threats didn't stop after her father's death. One of them came for her this morning. Richard leaned back, the charm in his voice gone. He said she should be grateful someone had the courage to protect the company from her mistakes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Madison accused him of ordering the bombing. Richard laughed quietly, almost kindly, and said he didn't need to dirty his own hands when others were willing to do it for him. The door opened behind her. Derek Long stepped inside, a gun glinting in his hand. The sound of the storm vanished under the weight of silence. Ethan froze in the corridor, eyes wide as the camera caught the scene. Madison didn't move. She just whispered Derek's name like it hurt to say it. He looked at her, his voice low, tired. He said he had done everything Richard asked until he realized there was no end to it. He admitted he'd killed her father, made it look like a heart attack, and built the bomb that morning. But he said he wouldn't do it again. Richard turned on him, shouting that he was insane, that no one would believe him. He reached for the gun. Derek shoved him back. The weapon fired once, the flash lighting the room. Ethan burst through the maintenance door at the same moment, instinct taking over before thought could catch up. He hit Madison, knocking her to the floor as the bullet tore across his side. The sound was deafening. FBI agents stormed the office seconds later, shouting commands. Red lights from the squad cars flashed through the windows, pulsing across the walls like a heartbeat. Derek dropped the gun, hands shaking, while Richard screamed that they couldn't prove anything. The agents didn't answer. The confession had already been transmitted and recorded. Madison crawled to Ethan's side. His shirt was soaked in blood, his breathing shallow. She pressed her hand over the wound, her voice breaking as she told him to stay awake. He tried to smile. She asked him why. Why he would do it again. Risk everything for her. His voice was faint but steady. Because someone has to show up. The words hit harder than the gunfire. Outside, the storm raged, washing the city clean. Inside, the truth lay bare, illuminated by the flicker of police lights and the fragile sound of a man keeping his promise one last time. The world outside the hospital kept moving, but inside, time had slowed to something small and gentle. Weeks had passed since that night. The news called Ethan Cole a hero. Headlines flashed his name. Talk shows replayed his story, and strangers sent letters to the hospital, thanking him for saving a woman they would never meet. He read none of it. The only thing that mattered was the little girl sitting on the edge of his bed, her feet swinging above the floor, coloring quietly in a book. Lily looked up at him with serious eyes and asked if he was still going to fix things like before. Ethan smiled, his voice low and tired, but warm. From now on, he said, he'd fix the things that mattered most. She didn't understand the weight of those words, but she smiled anyway and went back to drawing. Her small hand moved carefully across the paper and tea. And for a moment, Ethan felt the noise of the world fade away. When he finally returned home, the apartment felt different. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. There were still bills stacked on the counter, a leaky faucet that needed tightening, and the smell of old coffee lingering in the kitchen. But there was also laughter now, and drawings taped to the fridge, and a feeling that maybe everything broken could still be repaired if someone cared enough to try. A week later, Madison called. Her voice was calm, steady, softer than before. She asked him to come to the office. When he walked in, the building no longer felt like a battlefield. The walls seemed brighter, the people lighter. Madison greeted him not as a boss, but as someone who owed him more than words could ever repay. She told him the merger was dead, that she had dismantled the board members who'd helped cover the corruption, that every security protocol had been rewritten from the ground up. Then she offered him a position, Director of Corporate Security, a salary that could have changed his life. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked around the office, at the framed photo of her father still standing on the desk, at the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Finally, he said he'd take it, but only if part of his salary went toward an employee education fund. He wanted every janitor, every technician, every invisible worker to have a chance at something better. Madison didn't speak for a moment. Her eyes shone with something between admiration and gratitude. She told him he had changed the way she saw everything. That courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it just showed up quietly and did what needed to be done. 2 weeks later, at the company's annual meeting, Madison stood before hundreds of employees. Cameras flashed. Reporters filled the back rows. She announced the creation of the Ethan Cole Foundation, a scholarship program for employees and their families. She called Ethan to the stage. The applause rose like a wave. He didn't like attention, but he walked to the microphone anyway. His speech was short. He said that being brave didn't mean not being scared. It meant showing up when you're needed, even if no one will remember your name afterward. The room went silent, then broke into applause that didn't seem to end. Madison stood beside him, smiling. It wasn't the kind of moment you saw in news stories. It was smaller, truer. That night, back home, Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with her drawing still in her hand. Ethan carried her to bed, then walked into the kitchen. The city stretched out beneath the window, alive and endless. He noticed a new drawing taped to the fridge. A small figure stood in a window, a warm yellow light glowing behind it. In the street below, Another figure was walking home. Ethan touched the paper lightly and smiled. The world didn't need more heroes. It needed people who showed up. And for the first time in a long time, he knew that coming home was enough.